Hello, Sales Hacker community. Welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. My name is Scott Barker. As you may or may not know, I head up sales and partnerships at Sales Hacker, and we've got a juicy topic today. Super excited about it. It's something that has been very top of mind for myself recently, and that is how sales and marketing professionals are skyrocketing their productivity. And before I do introduce my two awesome guests, a few housekeeping notes before we get started. So this will be a Q&A style webinar. So I'll be grilling these two with some questions all around productivity and efficiency. And we're gonna try to get both a sales and a marketing perspective on a lot of these questions. We know this is Sales Hacker, but with the lines blurring more and more every day, I think that it's super important to get both perspectives. So that being said, we do want to hear from you as well. So we want to make this super interactive. So go to the chat feature, let us know your name, where you're from, may even do a little shout out, and make sure that you are asking questions throughout. Get engaged. If there's anything that you're struggling with in your current role, let us know and we'll do our best to answer it. Okay, now that's out of the way, I want to introduce my two guests. We are joined by Mike Stevenson, Senior Director of Commercial Sales at DocuSign, and Francesca Lao, got the coolest name in town, who is the Senior Director of Analytics at DocuSign. Mike and Francesca, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. So we're super lucky to have you both. And I always do like to add a little bit more color because people don't do it themselves. Everyone's always too humble on these things. So Mike, we were talking before, and you're originally from LA. You've been in B2B sales and sales management for 10 years now, selling everything from cloud server space with CBeyond to lesson platforms with Skill Loop, and most recently systems of agreement with DocuSign. So kind of ran the whole gambit, which I love. And you've got a passion for developing sales talent and building high performance, structured and efficient sales teams. And in a few weeks, you're leaving the Pacific Northwest of Seattle to go lead DocuSign's sales development function in EMEA over in Dublin. That's awesome. Excited for that one? Nervous?
Yeah, really looking forward to it. Yeah, a little bit nervous. Definitely going to be a cultural shift, but I think that'll be where so much of the personal professional growth will come from.
Totally, absolutely. And they have a huge tech scene over in Dublin as well.
Yeah.
And Francesca, all right. So we were talking, and so you run marketing and analytics throughout DocuSign. And
I run marketing analytics, not all of marketing.
It's just a word, it sounds marketing analytics at DocuSign, which is really cool. And we were kind of talking about your career progression, where you went from a performance marketer to a traditional marketer, and then now to a modern marketer, which I love. It makes a good kind of segue. And now the main focus is using analytics to empower your marketing team and spilling over into sales as well.
Yeah, no, it's been a great journey. I definitely started out with search marketing, content marketing, all of that stuff. It gives me a good vision of what today's customers, marketers need to do their jobs. And I was always, as a marketer, looking for more data. So somehow found myself into the analytics world to get really close to the data and actually to be able to help people, or the marketers on the team, come up with the right campaigns and analyze those campaigns and target the right audiences and be most effective at it. So, and obviously getting to work with the sales teams through the pipeline is very metrics driven. So velocity, efficiency, and all of those buzzwords. It's been great.
I love it. Yeah, data really does drive everything that we do now as sales professionals. And just quickly, going to go over to the chat feature here, see who we have in the house. So we have Charlie, an account executive, actually from Honduras. So we have Honduras in the house. Pretty cool. We've got California represented. Mike, that'll make you happy. And we got Chicago. So really cool. Stockholm, Sweden is in the house. Pretty cool. Scottsdale, Arizona, Nicole, Niles, New York City. Love it. And okay, so before we dive in, pumped for this topic. You know, last week I actually made. Sorry. Hey man, sorry, I'm on a call right now. Cool. Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry to get your attention. I know you are.
Okay.
Your name is?
Scott.
Thanks.
Thank you, man. Okay. Nothing like live webinars, right? I hope it's a good package. Okay, so apologies for that, everyone. Let's see how much that threw me off what I was gonna say. Okay, so before we dive in, last week I actually made a video on LinkedIn, and it was regarding how people are managing their social presence versus their actual roles that they get paid to execute in. And it got a lot of traction. It seemed to strike this chord, which is very much in line with what we're going to discuss today. And it's, you know, in the modern business environment, we're given the same 8 hours, you know, as we always were, but we're expected to do a lot more in those 8 hours, things like social things, you know, things that just were not around, you know, even 5-10 years ago. And we have to find ways to fit it into the same hour day. So this is where productivity and efficiency comes up. And it can be really difficult to balance it all and make yourself super effective. So let's kind of start at the beginning with, you know, productivity in itself. Like, when do you feel most productive at work? You know, starting with Francesca, when do you leave thinking, you know, wow, that was a productive day?
I think a couple of areas. I feel most productive when I'm organized, that I have a clear view of, you know, my priorities and my team's priorities, and we have a plan of attack to get to things. So it starts with being organized, and then to do that, I kind of have to like block off some times, maybe a couple times a week. I tried once for every day, but that was a little ambitious. Where I can just like really think through what these things are. And once I have that, I can just like start executing. And I know what I need to execute on. So really managing kind of my calendar. And sometimes they're more successful than others. But when I have a plan, I feel pretty productive. And I'll pitch in one thing, because I know we're all in meetings a lot, or at least I am. And there is actually such a thing as a productive meeting. Like when you're far enough along.
Are you sure?
When you're far enough along and you have all the right people in the meeting engaged, there's nothing like, you know, getting all the SMEs in the room and banging through like your what your requirements are, what you're trying to get to, and have the set agenda. That actually is really, that feels really productive to me sometimes. Yeah.
Would totally agree. You know, planning is key. And I loved something that you said there, where blocking off time to think, which is, it sounds kind of funny, but, you know, we go from meeting to meeting to meeting, from task to task to task, and without actually sitting down and putting some real thought into it. I think it's massively important. And Mike, what about yourself?
Yeah, you know, I probably run into the same problems that most people do with having so many meetings throughout the day that it can get kind of distracting to pull away and take a look at the bigger picture. There's a couple of things that I like to do. One is I'm most productive in the mornings. I can just, I have my mental strength is there. I can fire away. So I take my hardest projects and I just block that period off in the morning so I can really plow through it. And then the other thing for thinking time, like Francesca was bringing up, you know, because I run a sales team, being out on the sales floor is the closest way that I can get a feel of what's going on in the pits. And so we have 3 call blocks in the day, and ideally I'd be able to walk the pits and sit and listen to conversations all 3 hours. It often ends up being that it might be a fraction or a period of time, but that sort of ends up being my thinking time. because you get that opportunity to see how the front lines are dealing with customer issues and prospects on the phone, and get to think like what's missing here, what can we do to get even more efficient, more productive.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And it's also about knowing yourself. Like you mentioned, you're super hyper productive in the morning. And I think it's important to actually reflect and look at yourself. Like, some people are night owls. We have our VP of marketing gets everything done at like the weirdest hours ever. But you have to know, I myself am also a morning person where I can just get blinders on it and power through things. So I think it's important to know kind of your hot and your cold spots as well. I like it. And I have a question. Do you guys know? So when I did this post on this, people were talking about using a Pomodoro timer. There was like 3 people that were into this. Have you guys heard of this at all? Do you guys use this? Dabbled in this at all?
No, I would.
No.
I'm sorry. What is it?
It's a Pomodoro timer. I think it's like a cooking timer. It's just like a new way people are structuring their days, where it's like 25-minute blocks on a set task, and then 5 minutes, and then 25 and 5. I've yet to try it out, but it seems like it's all the rage these days. So I may give it a shot.
Yeah, I think I've heard of it, but I've never actually even experimented with it. So.
Mm-hmm.
There's something interesting about having that timer ticking down as you're trying to get something done, right? It's like you have your own impending event built into this motion where you're like, oh gosh, I only have 17 minutes left. Tick, 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 tick.
Yeah. There's I'm going to butcher this quote, but there's basically a quote that says, whatever time you allot to something is how much time it will take you to get it done, right? So if you set 25 minutes, you're going to get it done. It might be a half-baked version of what it was, but it will get done.
So Francesca's point about meetings, I feel like that's so true, where sometimes people set a meeting for 30 minutes or 60 minutes, and you might be done with the bulk of the topic in 15, but the feeling to hit that 30 mark makes it so you're a little less productive there. So, having that motion of just saying, hey, we're done, ready to move forward, then you can cut out those little bits of your day that might not have been as productive.
Yeah. And putting a sales lens on that then, Mike, what's the average time for like a discovery call with your team? Are you still taking the full 30 minutes? You guys going 45 minutes? I know there's kind of this push to make it shorter.
Yeah. So my team, the sales development function, our job really is to get the highest quality pipeline to our account executives as possible. And that sometimes means kind of shortening the discovery process to leave something on the table for the account executive, but still getting the information that we need to put them in a position where first they feel really confident that this is, a good solid opportunity for them. It's going to be worth a 30-minute period of time that we block off on their calendar, but that also we've set up the call in a way where it can be an ideal customer experience, where the next questions, the next discovery call is building off the previous one. So essentially we try to stay fairly high level by asking situation, pain, implication type questions, but not really getting down into the numbers, the ROI, leaving that for our account executive teams. So that ends up netting out to being somewhere between a 10 to 15 minute discovery call. And then our AEs will take that and do 30 minutes. Nice.
Yeah. I think you can extract what you need in a 15-minute call, right? And if it takes more than that, I think it's on the actual rep, or you need to be more concise in the questions you're asking, and it's almost laziness if you got to ask so many things because it is the prospect's time. So I like that. It's shorter.
Yeah, and to the point about meetings, that just sort of, if you set it for 30, you feel obligated to take it to 30. If we ask our team to get more and more information, it can kind of end up being an interrogation, a back and forth between our team and the prospect, and then that only continues further into the process. So by staying high level enough that we give the AEs enough to dive into, then it feels a little bit more collaborative, like we're working together towards a solution.
I love that. That's awesome. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit here, because we all have our efficiency tools that we use day to day that we can't live without. So Francesca, over to you. Let's go maybe 3 tools that like you are just, if they were gone, your life would implode.
Yeah, I was trying to think through, and I feel very old school in my choice of tools. I would say Outlook is actually the thing that keeps me on task. Like I actively manage my calendar, and my team knows when I'm managing my calendar because they get the meeting invites. And for me, it's about knowing what you want to get done and what's in this particular day. Because like sometimes you'll have big meetings. You want to make sure that you have all the prep time you need beforehand to get yourself kind of mentally right, or do whatever other prep work you need to do. Or you're doing kind of one-on-ones with your team, and there's a little bit more emotional kind of asks from you. And so making sure that you're not too tired at the end of the day to actually give that. So it's a kind of your mental energy and your emotional energy, and kind of organizing that through your day, as well as like just getting the stuff that you need to get done, right? And of course, the other collaboration tools I would say is like, all the Microsoft Suite products and the Google Suite products. We use both for different things. Like Google Sheets is great for collaborating on quick like project plans, or like, punch lists for things. And then you might forget about it. It's not like you need to create a big project plan for every single thing, right? And I would say maybe like a HipChat tool. So we use HipChat, Jabber, some type of IM tool to get to the person you need to get to really quickly. So it really depends on what your, I think, company is standardizing on, I would say.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So some form of instant messaging, which I think is so key now. Thank goodness we don't have to send a million emails for every request now anymore. A good calendar app, and then some sort of collaborative, whether it's like a Google Drive or whatever it may be for collaboration. Nice. Yeah. And Mike, yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Francesca. We have Outlook, we have the whole Microsoft suite, and so we end up using those tools a lot to communicate, and I think it's really effective. And so when you're trying to get something done and to get that information really quickly, like Jabber is great. But I find myself having to sort of shut down these applications to get things done, because what happens is if I don't shut down Jabber or Outlook, then you run into a situation where you're fighting all these fires, and your entire day is being led by someone else's agenda, and that makes it really hard to accomplish the things that you need to do. So I have my OneNote up, and that's got my little check boxes for me to know what tasks I have to do throughout the day. And at certain points of the day, if what you're doing doesn't take as much conscious energy to be thinking through, maybe you can have those tools on so you can fight a few fires simultaneously. But I think it's also important to sort of take those off, turn them off, so you can have good thinking time, get strategic, and then also start to think about some of the projects that you have to complete for the day, week, month, etc.
Great point, for sure. I try and mute my notifications for everything when I'm doing work that really needs creative juices or anything. And I think it's about being proactive rather than reactive all day, right? If you've got it, like you said, just fighting fires. But that's a great point. So yeah, so internally at Sales Hacker, so we're fully remote. So we definitely rely on a lot of productivity tools to not only stay connected but collaborate. So we've got like Slack, we've got Asana, which is just like a glorified shared calendar. My live and die by my Gmail calendar as well. If it's not in there, it doesn't even exist in my world. And then of course, like a tool, like DocuSign, it's part of my world. I don't even remember, the days when you had to scan contracts and send those through anymore. It seems crazy that was a thing. Helps me very much in my day.
And I'm like, oh my God, we could use DocuSign. So it's great to be providing that service for other people now.
Yeah. It's awesome. It goes without saying. And okay, let's. Oh, Mike Richmond loves Slack as well. Thanks for jumping in. And yeah, so feel free to ask any questions as they come. But next question I want to ask, and it's kind of flipping the script on the efficiency chat we're having. But what should sales and marketing teams stop doing because it's counterproductive, or maybe a time waster that you see?
Well, I actually wanted to talk about this in the context of sales and marketing working together. So
okay.
There's definitely in the past I've seen areas where there's like tension, like sales has a number of metrics they're looking at it one way, marketing has metrics they're looking at another way, and they can't come to agreement on like what's working, what's not working, what are the targets, what's the performance look like. And for me, I think what's counterproductive, that's counterproductive. Not working off the same like one set of metrics, figuring out who's better or who's contributing more, or being 100% right all the time. So I think that's counterproductive. Like you're one company. You guys, I consider Mike's a great partner, and our teams work together to like get the best result. And it's not a question of like, oh, my campaigns are so great, or our team's campaigns are so great, or the sales teams qualify or terrible, or the sales teams are terrible. It's not. It's about what's the whole process look like, because it's about the customer and what's their experience, right? So I think the size and the division is counterproductive, and frankly, in the land of efficiency, it doesn't help us at all. So
yeah. I would definitely agree that the alignment has to be there, and if you're both, care about different metrics, then it's going to waste a lot of time. I've always said, and death to vanity metrics is something that I say all the time. If marketing has their vanity metrics, they're like, yeah, look how many click-throughs we got, and then Mike's over there saying, look how many activities we did. Well, neither of those things actually produce anything. So I think that's an awesome point. And Mike, what about yourself?
Yeah, well, I cannot echo what Francesca said enough. I think that we have had such a good collaborative relationship because we all just feel like we know we're fighting for the same goal. I think in sales, we get so competitive sometimes that you get kind of competitive against other departments too. And when you look at it like, hey, let's be competitive against the marketplace, that's where you get really collaborative and look at a win as something that you win together. But yeah, I was talking to a friend the other day about his sales organization, and something that one of his sales leaders said in the organization made me think about this question. He had said the resolution to a problem was just pick up the phone and dial, just dial. And when I heard that, my thought was, okay, that could be the resolution. And in the past, that historically often is how salespeople tend to solve problems, right? Is, hey, it's a numbers game. Just hammer as many times as you can, prospect away, get the phone book, call. And I think that mindset can get a little dangerous at times, because sometimes underlying why there are fewer calls, or some things that might be different than historical sales methodologies, are the way that sales is transforming. And so I think if there was one thing I'd say, if we could sort of stop doing, it's stop being wary of new ideas or innovating in the sales motion, because sometimes underlying these things that we thought were best practices, like you got to make 100 dials an hour and make sure that you're prospecting this exact way, is the actual answer to how we're evolving as an org.
That's so awesome to hear you say that, and definitely in line with my thinking as well. And I think sales in general is moving that way. There's the thought process of, yes, you can bang out 100 dials an hour, or what if you spent that hour, even though you're in sales, writing a really thoughtful, relevant LinkedIn post, and then you look at who likes that post and you prospect that way. there's all these different methods that you can do. And I think it kind of goes back to our original point at the beginning of this. If you're just banging out calls all day, there's none of that time to stop and think about why. Where is the relevance for these calls or the context for these calls? I think that's an awesome point. So Corey from Toronto has a question on this. And Mike, I'm going to put this one to you because it's kind of just in line with what I said. What are your thoughts on account executives taking time out of their day and writing content, specifically for LinkedIn, to support their brand? Would you be happy that your team was taking an hour out of their selling day to do that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the results would speak for themselves, I think, with something like that. I always like to have the mentality of trying things and being open to testing whether something works to drive a positive result. And so with that, I've never done it personally, so I can't say whether or not it would work or not. All I would say is it's really great that you're trying something new. And if you are to do it and you're to see really positive results, heck, keep doing it. If not, then great. Now you know that that's maybe not as productive as an activity as you might have thought originally.
Absolutely. So try it, iterate the process. If it's working, keep going, double down. If not, leave it in the dust.
I have to give my analytics plug of making sure you know what you're trying to achieve and measuring all of those things along the way, and to be able to sell it. How do you know that it's working? Right, it's not the number of likes. Is it your opportunities, your versus your time, right?
Totally. Yeah, likes don't move the needle, unfortunately, as many people might like to think that they do. They don't. But okay, this is a good segue into my next question. What are the sales productivity metrics that you are tracking? How are you measuring and reporting on these? And then I'll have a follow-up question. What actions are you taking to address those results? And Mike, I'll push that one to you.
Sure. So we're gold on the quantity of opportunities that we create for our AE teams. And that's one part of the metrics that we're taking a look at. That's because that's where all the team is gold. But, the other ones that we're using as a temperature check are the closed won ratio of that. And that, because at the end of the day, kind of like to your point, if it's not driving the end goal, it's just a vanity metric. And same thing with opportunities. If they're just fluff, it doesn't drive our bottom line. It's not relevant. So we make sure that our opportunity closed won conversion rate is staying pretty strong and healthy. And then also the ASP of our pipeline that we provide is at a good, healthy level, and also pretty similar to the closed won ASP for our account executives. As it rolls back down to my team to get to those SQOs, we're thinking about, the hard thing is there's not just one metric. I think when I first started in sales, it was that one metric of activity. Just how many calls did you make? How many doors did you hit on? And that was enough to know essentially how successful you're going to be. Right now, we triangulate quite a few metrics to determine where somebody needs a little bit of coaching, but most of it starts with how many SQOs are you generating? And so relative to the general pool, if someone's not generating probably as much as their keep, then we start to look at what's their SQL to SQO percentage, their SAL to SQL, and then their lead to accept rate. So we look at each of those and then benchmark against the pool and some of the serious decisions metrics that we believe are ideal to sort of figure out where in that process is the breakdown. Is somebody not accepting enough leads? Are the leads they accepting? Are they not having the right sales conversation? Or is it a quality thing that they're not sending up the right calls to their AEs? And part of that's also triangulating against some of the other typical metrics, like how many calls is someone making per day? How many calls are over 2 minutes? What's their total talk time? And then one that we're really fond of, especially recently, we've done so much to get to a point where we can track time to the first call. And we're really focused in on providing an ideal prospect experience But then it's also an ideal sales experience by getting a hold of the person within 5 minutes of their activity. So much value comes out of that, from, the prospect being ready, excited, and essentially enabled to have that conversation because they're either doing that trial right now, they just went through the demo, et cetera. But then also for the salesperson is, you don't end up doing 9 to 15 touches after that on somebody who could have given you their yes or no in that first call. And that saves both you time and then the prospect the hassle of having to see these emails or get these calls that they're not interested in receiving. So that's sort of the laundry list of all the different metrics that we're looking at.
Yeah, I love it. And then, so I just got a clarifying question. So 5 minutes to get in touch with the lead. That's awesome that you guys are managing to do that. Are you treating leads any different? Like if someone, let's say, maybe does a trial with you guys or downloads an ebook, are you getting in touch with those within 5 minutes regardless, or are there different ways that your team is structuring their follow-up process?
Well, thanks to some of the amazing analysts on Francesca's team, we have, it's so great to have that sort of modern marketer, as she was referring to herself, because it's so data driven. They analyzed hundreds of thousands of records to come up with what is our engagement model. When is somebody ready to be engaged with? And there are certain actions like the ones you just described that are, we see them as far enough down the engagement pipeline that they should be talking to somebody pretty quickly. And that's trial, demo, webinar, white paper. There are other activities though that kind of get somebody closer to that, and that's just the number of emails that they're engaging with, their click-through rate, how many websites that they're viewing on DocuSign.com, are they high-value web pages, et cetera. And once it reaches that trigger that says, okay, this person is engaged with us enough that we feel like they're far enough down the engagement cycle to be speaking with the sales rep, we want to get a hold of them within that 0 to 5 minute period from that recent action that we feel like has triggered that event.
Makes sense. And Francesca, any more color to that? That sounds like a salesperson's dream to actually know, hey, this person is ready. Let's give them a call. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a pretty advanced kind of it's a lead scoring model if you think about it. With profile and engagement, a combination of profile and engagement, and we've looked at, as Mike mentioned, all the data and how people convert blindly, and then really just through the score and the automation triggers, streamline the process for the sales reps. They don't have to think about it. So by the time lead gets to them, they know that this person's ready. And obviously doing the education so that they understand what it takes for a prospect to get to them. So they're enabled to have those conversations, right?
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a huge productivity and efficiency booster right there. If these are the people that we should be talking to based on a score. That's awesome. All right, so going back to yourselves as marketing and sales professionals, because I'd like to kind of approach this as personal kind of hacks that you use, and then also the company-wide and team-wide. I'm sure your to-do list is always massive, and by adding this webinar today, it probably made it even a little bit longer. How are you prioritizing your tasks today? Whoever wants to kick off that one.
I'll talk a little bit. Mike's been, talking a lot. I'll give you a little rest. I would say my team and I are very kind of goal driven. So we are, even though we're in marketing, we are aligned our metrics with sales. So we actually have, Mike's SQO targets are our SQO targets. So when we're thinking about what am I getting done today, what are my goals, are the things that I'm doing in service of those goals, and then prioritize based on that, based on the impact of the activities that I expect to do, right? Something might feel really urgent, but really what's the impact of it? And then there's a time aspect. Is it short term? Is it long term? Because you don't want to just be doing anything that's just urgent, and not really be planning for the long term. So it's a little bit of a matrix decision-making process, but those are the kind of principles that guide it.
Makes total sense. And yourself, Mike?
Yeah, I try to ask myself, particularly when you're talking about when you have these days that just you have so many things on the to-do list, you just don't know how you're going to get it done. Is this a revenue-generating activity? And because I'm in sales, I think that's an easy barometer for me of whether this is a higher priority or a lower priority task for me. And then based on the sort of internal answer to that question, I can understand, is this a fire that I really need to fight right now? Or is this one that we can let burn for a little bit while we deal with what we're trying to do every single day, which is make sure that we're delivering on our numbers for our account executive teams. So if that task falls into that category, then high priority.
Yeah, it's an easy one for sales guys. You know, revenue trumps all, and that's it. That's it. I like it. Okay, I've got an interesting question. Little off topic, but I'm curious to know as well. So this is Herbert Horvath. His question is for Mike. How is your sales team structured? Do you divide between inbound and outbound SDRs? And how are the leads actually sent over to your AEs? So the handoff process.
Yeah, really a great question, and one that we have, depending on when you would have asked this over my 4 years of running this team, we'd have a totally different answer, because it's just been such an evolving situation for us from when we had 25 SDRs and 22 MDRs, and we've built to scale. At this point, we're close to 200 of those in North America. So I run, it's quite a big pipeline team. So we have about 150 are MDRs, so outbound, and that's split between commercial and enterprise. And then we have about 50 SDRs, and so that's my team. Those strictly inbound leads, and that can be things like an inbound call, a trial, demo, contact us. Could be white paper, could be a content syndication that engaged heavily with us. But any one of those leads is something that my team would work on. And what we found over the years is that as long as we don't over specialize and get into a place where we've introduced areas of inefficiency, the more we specialize, the better the result. And specific with DocuSign, we have so many different verticals and industries that we serve that to provide an ideal prospect experience, we have to be able to speak to, what are the financial service needs for DocuSign, healthcare, real estate, education, public sector, and then, the various industries that don't even fall into those categories. And so in order to best speak to that, we've specialized some of our inbound teams to be experts and also to receive the leads specific to that vertical. Now, obviously, we can't do that for every single one. So, of course, we have geo reps who, is fairly well versed in some of the key industries for our geo teams. And we do this through a distribution engine, which is the platform that we found was the most versatile to help us route the leads, and then has also been able to introduce for us some new ways to change the behavior of reps. So things like if somebody doesn't get to a lead within a certain period of time, they get that lead, that lead gets redistributed to somebody else, or a variety of different metrics.
That went straight to my heart.
Yes. Your reaction is that was mine when I saw that opportunity. I was just like, wow, I don't have to fight uphill on this anymore. Yeah. It's just part of the system. And so, that's something that that tool's enabled us to do, as well as, of course, route the leads as they come in real time to the individuals that we think are best able to take that question.
On the point of the handoffs to the AEs, though, I think Mike and team have done, and what we've tried to help enable is that, when an SQL turns into an SQ, sometimes there's a lag for the AEs to pick it up too. So we started measuring that time as well and publishing that out. Oh yeah.
Oh man, that's amazing. I don't think I've heard of that, but I love that, and it's good for the customer, right? Like it's good. they'll be on it quick. Yeah, very cool. And then I guess that evolution, then you had all these iterations of the kind of the structure, and that would have been supported from Francesca's team and all the analytics that you guys are kind of serving up.
We work in partnership with, there's also a sales intelligence team. So for Mike's team specifically with the inbound leads, you need the connection between kind of the marketing programs and the scoring model and the pipeline. And it's a little bit different when you're doing outbound and getting query to prospect. So we're getting more and more into that area, but I would say we definitely had, Mike's benefited more from our efforts.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, moving on to productivity. Okay, so productivity, efficiency. Is this something, like how quickly are you guys drilling this into reps' heads, both marketing, sales? Is this right in your onboarding and your training, or is this something that comes after as they get under their feet?
So we're at a scale now where productivity and efficiency we feel like are built into our processes. We give our reps from day one the roadmap to their role. There is some area where they can probably lose productivity, but for the most part, their day is directed by the processes that support our overall org. For example, if a lead comes in, as soon as you see that notification, you drop whatever you're doing to call that lead right then. To putting together notes for AEs, et cetera, those kind of activities, that's built into our day to day. And part of the reason we have to do that is again, like at our scale of 50 people, in order to maximize total efficiency, we want to avoid giving too much area of interpretation of what the best way to do things is, because we've been doing this for long enough where we know this is the most efficient way to go about the day. And so in order to get to that, here are the things that you need to do. It doesn't necessarily mean that, every minute of every day is completely structured, but there's definitely enough processes in place and enough structure in the day where reps are pretty clear about how each day is going to go down.
I would say you definitely also do a great job of getting feedback from folks, right? Because you have a process and you think it's great, but there's always optimizations, and a lot of the reps have some fun ideas. Some of them are practical and you can try them out, and some of them are a little bit interesting. So it's always good to have that feedback loop.
That's such a good point, because over the years, the best ideas that we've had to improve our team's productivity have come from our SDRs, and just being open to listening. Kind of that back to that idea of like, if you just said, if you don't listen to your sales rep and you say, you know what, you just need to dial, you might be missing the most important message of all, which is, why aren't they dialing, right? If they are incented to achieve this metric of SQOs or revenue or whatever it is, and they're finding a unique way to do it, I think that's something to explore and figure out, is there meat on that bone? Can you pursue that more at a bigger scale and replicate that best practice, for us among the other 49 SDRs?
Yeah, great point. Feedback is definitely key to keep that open. And okay, so next one, I don't think you can talk about efficiency without talking about automation. How heavily do you rely on automation to increase efficiency? And I'll shoot that over to you, Francesca. Kick that one off.
Yeah, well, Mike and I talked about our automation a while ago, and we operate at such a scale that I don't think we could actually do much of what we do without automation. We have lead scoring model, and we have a ton of leads that come in at the top of the funnel, and you don't want to you have to make sure that they're the right state to send them over to the SDRs to call on. So that we rely on a ton of our marketing automation system for that, as well as for the lead routing, as Mike mentioned, to do a lot of sending it to the specialized teams and so on. So it would be safe to say that we can't do much without automation. But there are some important things to remember about automation. Like, it's not a set and forget. You have to A, test it all the time, and B, monitor it and keep optimizing it. It's an iterative process, right? We're always, as we always say, we're always open to feedback. You get the feedback. How do you, build it into the automation and test the flows and just keep iterating. So, yeah.
So it's not a one and done process. It's constantly evolving. And then by the time, so you've got the, lead scoring, you got the lead routing, so that's all automated. And then by the time it gets to your team, Mike, the next steps there, your reps have cadences. Do you give them flexibility with what they're creating their own cadences? What does that look from an automation perspective?
Yeah, so we're in the process of actually introducing outreach to our team, which will have all the cadences, all the sequences pre-built. But we've gone through the process of having the SDRs build it themselves. Now we're working; it's an extremely iterative process. We started this sort of sequence evolution 6 months ago, and have been meeting with a group of 7 SDRs. In the very beginning, every single day for a half hour, but for the last 4 months or so, 3 times a week for 30 minutes. And a big part of what we're doing is taking some of the analytics that we get from our sequence results and kind of triangulating that with feedback from the SDRs about what's working and what's not with it, so we can continue to iterate on our sequences. Because the nice thing about something like outreach is that you can add areas where you can customize your sequence. So you can add something like, brackets, insert comment here. So if you have that capability, then you can still create templates that allow for personalization without sort of over-engineering the whole sequence world, right? Because we have a fairly set type of lead that comes in. It's either a financial service lead, demo, it's a real estate trial, a lot of different types of industries and lead sources. But for the most part, if we can bulk them into a smaller set of sequences rather than have reps just run free, create a bunch of their own, we're going to be able to get better analytics about these 15 and continue to iterate just on these 15 to 20 so that those 15 to 20 are the best possible sequences we could ever create. And so as an entire team, we're taking these best practices and again, sending them out to all 50 SDRs instead of them being kept up with the top 5 to 10.
I love it. That's great. And so do you guys think there's anything you shouldn't automate? Anything that needs that personal touch still? And where do you see people doing this wrong with automation?
Okay, so I heard about this sales process recently where they were on an auto dialer and the prospect would pick up the phone before the salesperson was ever connected. The auto dialer would have someone ask them, "Are you this prospect?" Right? They would say, "Are you Scott Barker?" Scott would say, "Yes, I am." And then the salesperson would then insert that convo and then be a totally different voice and have to pick up the conversation right off the bat.
Yeah.
To me, that level of automation is dangerous because if you're Scott and you had this prospect experience, I don't think you're likely to feel valued as a prospect if, the person who you're talking to didn't even know that they were going to be talking to you until the split second before they got on the phone with you. While you can reach probably a huge audience doing that, if Scott's a high value prospect, you're likely to be offended and maybe not want to do business with that organization, as opposed to if I know a little bit about Sales Hacker before I call in, enough about Scott that I can at least personalize and tailor my conversation to him, his needs, his industry's needs, company's needs, then you're more likely to make Scott feel like, okay, this is, a conversation where this person is valuing my time and be interested in moving the sales cycle forward.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, God forbid that you're contacting VPs of sales in that manner. I think your poor BDR SDR may have a rough conversation, to say the least.
Yeah.
I would say with automation, you always want to look at what me and my analytic approach, like what's the ROI on it? You know, you don't, just because you can automate it doesn't mean that you should, right? Well, like it's an investment to automate something, right? I mean, it takes time. If you're not going to get the benefit out of it, just saying that you have it automated is not great. Like this particular thing, you know, it's like, what are you saving really?
Yeah, totally. And what are you potentially losing? Like, what's the potential downside, and does that maybe outweigh the upside of our connects rates go up, but our overall ops go down? Then you don't want to do that for sure. Okay, so I'm going to take a few more questions from the audience after this last question. I think this last question is a great one, and it's how do you measure the correlation between productivity and revenue? Because productivity is great, but it has to be at the right things to produce the result that you want. So at DocuSign, how are you measuring that today?
Go for it, Mike.
Yeah, sure.
It's a tough question. It's probably the hardest one of the webinar, but it's a big topic.
Yeah. We have so many metrics of the pipeline that productivity and measuring it has to do with, for us, looking at each little part of it. So for example, like, the total leads that come in, the leads that then turn into MQLs, the percent that then turn into SALs, SQLs, SQOs is really important for us understanding that productivity piece of my team, the sales dev function. But where it all comes into play is, does that SQO turn into closed-won revenue? And so we can value our productivity based on what the closed-won revenue is at the end of our efforts. So if an SDR generates 30 SQOs, which typically would turn into 10 closed-won opportunities, what is the value of the efforts that went into those 30 opportunities? And we can, assess what the actual dollar value is and see, is that productive enough of an activity that we want to continue doing it? And if not, how can we make it more productive?
Yeah, great point. Anything to add from an analytics perspective, Francesca?
Well, the funnel that Mike described is something that my team has on our dashboards that we measure, so that he can have them at his fingertips and drill down on a by rep basis. So you can just having that data easily available makes a world of difference in terms of making it actionable for the sales leaders.
Awesome. So it's almost then kind of working backwards. So if to get the productivity, so it's the closed-won revenue. If that looks all good, then everyone's happy. But if there's an issue there, then you kind of just keep going up the funnel to see where that missing link is, whether it's the productivity of the rep or perhaps something else.
Well, we have benchmarks on each stage. So, I mean, yes, we definitely closed-won is great, but if something's off at any stage in terms of the benchmark, you're looking at it regardless of if everything looks great up the funnel, right? So.
Got it. Makes sense. Awesome. All right, let's turn to our audience who's been super engaged. So thank you, everyone. Hassan has a question for Mike. How many SDRs should a first-time manager max out at, leading to ensure that they can, monitor productivity and efficiency properly?
I think you said first-time manager too, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an important part, or important thing to keep into consideration. If somebody's been a manager for a long time, they might be able to take on more reps at one time. But I think the other question that I would have is, are these SDRs inbound SDRs, or is it outbound sort of MDR function? What's that blend? Because I'd find that with inbound leads, you can deal with a higher rep to manager ratio than with outbound leads, because outbound prospecting, it's so heavily needs coaching in the moment and in real time that a 10 to 12 person team is a pretty high number. And you can get to a higher place if the maturity of the team is at a place where it doesn't need a lot of coaching. But for a first-time manager building that team up, it really would depend on how many reps you're able to keep at a high enough tenure to sort of coach that newer group. And then depending on that, you may want to triangulate on a number that feels like you're not losing anyone's engagement because of your lack of presence. And it's hard to pin down a number specific because everybody's business is different. You know, for example, when I was managing AEs, when I had 8 AEs, I felt like I had more to do than I could ever imagine. And the thought of having 9 was outrageous. But when we have our SDR teams, we have a really high ratio. We have about 15 to 1. And that seems to be a pretty good ratio because of just the motion is a little less complex. And the prospect call that you're having doesn't need as much coaching as it does like in that outbound motion or that closing motion.
Great. So as a rough benchmark, about a 15 to 1, and then if it's specifically outbound, which it looks like Hassan has clarified it is outbound, you would cut that down a little bit more in like the 10, 12 range?
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe even start with 8, you know, especially because it's a first-time manager, and that's going to be a lot. That's going to feel like one more, and you're just, how will I ever have the time? But yeah, of course you can ramp up.
Awesome. All right, great. I love this question from Tony Kevin. It's something we didn't actually touch on today, but so I'm glad you brought it up. And Francesca, I'll throw this one your way. So there's a lot of stats out there showing that the happier an employee is, the more productive they tend to be. What non-analytical tools or processes do you use at DocuSign to help your employees feel happier and thus more productive?
I would say non-analytical. Like, I don't know about that. Well, to make my employees happier, I've found that listening to them. I mean, the one-on-ones you can't beat those, right? Definitely just making time, like we're all busy, but making sure you have regular checkpoints with them, both individually and as a team. I'm a big believer in kind of the team culture and helping them help each other too, and you get that camaraderie going, so you're enjoying your time at work as well. It's not really an analytical tool, but I have invested in automation tools for like things like data cleaning or things just like analysts have to do a lot of grunt work, and I want to get that away and get them doing the fun stuff where like, oh, I want to build a model or I want to do an analysis that's going to make a difference, not like I want to clean data. So really listening to them as to like where they're spending like, you know, dirty work or like repetitive tasks that are a little bit mind-numbing, and trying to take those out of their day-to-day. So that's what I look for. And whether I can pull in other teams like IT or BI or whoever else, or even like talking to their end customers, like other marketers, and like what you're looking for stuff. Like, hey, if you're going to make a request, here's the things you need to do to like make it simple, right? And so for me, it's about enabling my team to do their best work and try to act as their buffer to everyone else. I'll play the bad guy to keep them happy.
I love it. So listening, you take on any of the challenges. So you take the brunt of any bad things that happen, and then try and remove the things that are no fun, the grunt work. I think those are super important. And Mike, what about yourself? I'm sure there's a big motivation piece that comes in to your role as well.
Yeah, I mean, and we have a sales environment, so of course we do a lot of spiffs. I'm going to make a plug because I'm so excited about this sort of spiff train that we've gotten on, which is our best spiff ever. We did this battleship spiff. You know, for sales leaders out there, I have a big recommendation is you leverage old like Hasbro games, Chutes and Ladders, Battleship, Monopoly, something like that. We did one, or we've been talking about doing one that's like Candyland related, because the thing that's fun about those, I think, is that it gets people excited to win the game because it's the game. And then the side benefit is that you win this spiff where there's, you know, some prize at the end. You get to go on a boat or something. So some of those things are really, really fun, and just they feed off that competitive energy of the sales team. But then the other thing, I've heard this a lot recently, and I really try hard. These two words when I'm with my employees is just be present. It's so easy to get distracted by the many things you have to do throughout the day. But just like Francesca said, that it's the number one thing to keep the employees happy is to listen to them and really be present with them when you're in one-on-ones and in coaching sessions.
Huge. And I think that is an amazing way to wrap up. Be present and play Candyland. Those are like two of the best things I've heard. That's amazing. Awesome. Well, just before we kind of, you know, sign off here, we're at time. For those very few people who maybe don't know what DocuSign does, how does DocuSign help sales and marketing professionals today?
Okay, yeah, for us, well, DocuSign just accelerates the speed of business. And sort of like what you're saying in the beginning of the call, it's hard to imagine how we can exist in a world that doesn't have things happen instantly anymore. DocuSign accelerates that agreement between multiple parties and makes it so you can focus on, you know, all the things surrounding getting business done instead of the thing that's the most fundamental, which is that agreement.
Awesome. All right. Well, Francesca, Mike, thank you so much for your insights. This has been a really fun chat. And thank you, audience, for all the engagement. We got a lot of love today, but thank you both very much.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.